It was the biggest police corruption scandal in New Jersey history.
Federal agents arrested 16 people on charges of bribery, extortion, and kickbacks.
At the very heart of the West New York Police Department was an elaborate criminal enterprise.
Dozens of police officers.
From the top down, the chief was involved in this.
Acting as if they were above the law.
If you paid a bribe, you got protection. If you didn't pay a bribe, you were raided.
It had been going on for decades.
They did this with impunity. Total, absolute impunity.
Until one young officer risked his life to stop it.
I was reporting back to the FBI. All of this was while wearing a wire for them.
His courageous undercover operation cleaned up a city.
It's a hero in my book.
But cost him his career.
I can't pick up a police job anywhere in the country.
In the movies, we expect the hero to be rewarded. In real life, it doesn't always work out that way.
There's no recovery from this.
Rich Rivera paid a tremendous price for the integrity that he showed.
This will follow me the rest of my life.
West New York is a small town with a big city attitude.
West New York was this gritty community that you really didn't have a good handle on.
Located in the shadow of New York City, it's home to 53,000 people, all jammed into 1 square mile.
As urban can get, just like any congested, neighborhood in Manhattan or Brooklyn or the Bronx.
And along with its big city atmosphere, West New York has always had big city problems.
We had the gambling, we had prostitution, we had after-hour liquor places.
West New York always had an organized crime issue, going back decades.
Growing up, the Italians ran the town, and then after the influx of Cubans that came in, they were well organized and heavily engaged in criminal syndicate activity.
By the 90s, it was the Cuban mob. And the Cuban mob was led by a father and son team, Jose Grana and Jose Grana Jr.
There was a very lucrative prostitution business that Grana Sr. ran. I think the son primarily ran the gambling enterprise.
Odds were taken and bets were placed and collections were made and payouts were made.
They were in the business of crime, and it was very, very lucrative.
But for the young Richard Rivera, crime seemed a long way off. To him, West New York was simply home.
This is the Miracle Mile, right here. This is where I grew up.
What was it like to grow up there?
Oh, it's fantastic. My whole block was kids, all kids playing all day, every day after school.
Rivera was the oldest child of a truck driver and a stay-at-home mom. To this day, his West New York roots run deep.
All right, man, it's good to see you. Thanks for coming. It was a great, eclectic little neighborhood, only square mile. Everybody knew everybody. It was really close-knit, and I enjoyed growing up there. I loved it. What's going on, bro?
How's everything, all right?
All right, how's your family?
Everybody's doing good. How about yours?
Good.
In high school, Rivera was an outstanding football player, an all-county offensive lineman, who dreamed of becoming a police officer. What did working in law enforcement mean to you?
Oh, it meant a lot. It meant helping the community, first and foremost, and then also the excitement of fighting crime and arresting drug dealers and cleaning up the neighborhood.
It gives me a great deal of pleasure to present this trophy to Richard G. Rivera.
I will faithfully, impartially, and justly perform all the duties of the office of patrolman.
He wanted to be a good cop, and he was.
The reality of being a police officer in West New York was nothing like what Rich was taught at the academy.
The best way to describe it, Walt, is like the Wild West.
There's cops out there that committed crimes, and then there were individuals who would just like talk openly about money.
It's hard to do justice to the enormity of the corruption that was going on in West New York.
Maybe like, what you heard about Chicago, back in the heyday.
Cop goes out on the scene and there's a dead body, and what's the first thing he does? He rifles through the pockets and takes the guy's wallet or money out of his wallet or whatever.
These were not just police officers looking the other way. These were police officers actively taking part in crime.
It was a way of life. It was simply a way of life.
There was a score where guys made out with some money, and they bring it back to the police station, Everyone gets their cut.
Once you take that money,
They got you. You're done. They own you.
No rookie cop in that department had a prayer of doing anything but going along with that culture, with that way of life.
Chief Oriente was in a conspiracy with Jose Grana Sr., who was the led his own crime family in town, involving primarily prostitution and illegal gambling machines.
So he had his bag man that would deliver the money there. It was right out of a movie, like, with in a brown paper bag, dropping off money to the chief of police.
one of the things Oriente says is that when he became a police officer in 1956, the very first thing he learned was how to shake people down for money. That's how far back the corruption in West New York had gone.
If he was a good chief, he could have cleaned house. He could have put a stop to it. But of course he couldn't do that.
Under Oriente's watch, illegal gambling was happening right out in the open. There were more than 200 video poker machines in cafes and bodegas all across West New York.
Seeing these machines all over the place, I was saying, what the heck are these?
It was almost like being in Las Vegas, where you could go into a store and gamble on your lunch hour. Except that these poker machines are illegal.
No one's supposed to have them, but nobody's enforcing it. These things are the thing bang as soon as you walk into a store, and it's right there in front of you, and it's illegal to have it. So how is this possible?
That was all protected. So if you went in there and seized those machines, they would be returned probably within 28 to 48 hours. So it got to the point where even an average officer, an honest officer, it's like, what am I going to do? I mean, I come here, I charge these people, these machines are going to be back there by the time I write the report.
Every once in a while, Oriente would organize a kind of a sham raid and kind of seize a whole bunch of machines out of stores. They were never Grana machines, ever.
Rivera can hear his fellow officers openly talking about taking bribes.
There's a suitcase full of money, and the cops whack it up between each other. True story.
The chief's son stuck his head in the conference room and said, don't forget the chief. The chief likes to eat too.
At the same time, he's not so close to the corruption that he's witnessing things firsthand. But one day, Rich says he saw a sergeant, Carmine Gaeta, coming out of an unmarked storefront, carrying a paper bag.
When I saw Gaeta come out of the place, I'm trying to process it all. He's got something in his hand.
What was he carrying?
A brown bag. And he acted weird when he came out, looking around. Something like you see out of a movie scene.
You thought he had a bag of cash?
I could only assume. I don't know what's in the bag, but there was no croquetas in there, because they weren't cooking much in there, in that place, except the books.
Rich Rivera is actually seeing a sergeant walk out of a known criminal front with what appears to be a bag of cash.
This was monumental. 25 years old, and I got the whole world on my shoulders here, and I'm trying to carry it like Atlas.
This is a moment of truth.
What is this guy all about? We took an oath. We're supposed to defend the Constitution. We're not supposed to be taking bribes.
Does he say something? Does he report it? Or does he look the other way forever?
So I'm not going to go internally with it, because this has to deal with high-ranking individuals within the police department.
Ultimately, he decides to go home that night, pick up the phone, and call the FBI.
What am I going to do? Pull back now? You can't. It's too late.
And nothing is the same after that. Not for West New York, not for New Jersey, and certainly not for Rich.
Coming up, Richard Rivera puts his life on the line.
I was taking bribes. I was reporting back to the FBI.
But can he bring down both the Cuban mob and the corrupt cops protecting it?
It's hard to imagine how risky this must have been to him, to anyone he cared about.
What are the consequences of it? What could they do to me internally in the police department? What could happen out on the street?
When Crime Files continues. Crime Files continues with Above the Law.
It's 1996 in West New York. Rich Rivera is a young officer who has become aware of terrible corruption in the ranks.
You just observe and report as a police officer, so you make a lot of observations and you start figuring things out.
West New York is dominated by the Cuban mob, led by Jose Grana and Jose Grana Jr. Together they run prostitution, drugs, and illegal gambling, including these illegal video poker machines in stores all across town.
The cops were on the take. They were getting money for protecting these establishments.
One whistleblower in one department who saw bad and decided to work with the feds to try to clean that situation up.
The FBI asks Rivera to go undercover.
I was taking bribes. I was reporting back to the FBI. All of this was while wearing a wire for them.
It's hard to imagine an undercover assignment quite like this. Rich Rivera has to pose as a dirty cop, and then he has to infiltrate the Cuban mob in town.
The transformation to go from a straight A cop to, the belly of the beast, it was a huge transformation. It was mind-altering.
Each night, Rivera would hit the streets, offering protection to illegal businesses, taking payoffs, and documenting everything. By all accounts, he is remarkably good at this. In about 6 months, he becomes a close associate of Jose Grana Jr.
I built up a small empire.
You basically were playing the role of a kingpin.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I was running the rackets. They got to pay me at the end of the night. It's in cash. It was usually $200 a spot, and then that would accumulate.
It's hard to imagine how risky this must have been to him, to anyone he cared about.
Any move that I had to come up with, it had to be thought out 10 steps ahead, because what are the repercussions of this? What are the consequences of it? What could they do to me internally in the police department? What could happen out on the street?
Even he had to get dirty from time to time to establish or to protect his cover. If he had been pure and clean 24/7, he would have been marked right away, and not just ostracized. God knows he probably would have been killed.
While I was deep undercover, I never left my car unlocked or my windows down, because I had to worry about somebody planting something in it.
Oriente was masterminding and organizing a lot of the corrupt activity.
I muscled in, big time. So much so that I became a threat to the chief's operation.
He's hoping that by taking money away from the chief, he can set things in motion and expose more criminal activity. But tremendous risk to him. His own police chief now is an enemy.
Every other week, sometimes a few times in 1 week, I'm getting notice that I'm being charged with rule violations, policy violations.
Oriente first orders Rivera to undergo a fitness for duty exam, basically a psych exam.
Where he says, you're putting your nose in the wrong place. And then he hands me this order to go to the doctor's office.
He's suspended 3 times. The last time he suspended indefinitely.
I get suspended without pay, which is like a killer for a cop. Now you can't pay your bills, you can't feed your family.
You might think the FBI would stand up for him, but of course they can't. They still have an undercover operation going on. So Rivera is collateral damage at this point.
There's nobody here looking out for me. I was on my own before. I am definitely on my own now.
Among the suspects were 9 police officers from West New York, including recently retired Chief Alexander Oriente.
Anybody that gets indicted, we suspend. Anybody that declares himself guilty, we fire.
That was one of the roughest days of my life. Didn't realize how many relationships, friends, fellow students in high school were all intertwined in this.
As officers start to plead guilty, Chief Oriente makes a deal with the government.
So yeah, he sings like a canary, and everybody else pays the price, even though it was his department. It was his culture of corruption.
It's the ultimate punching down, on people beneath him.
We were shocked that the government would plead the king to go after his servants.
In this case, prosecutors cut deals with the head of the police department to get lower level cops and the head of the Cuban mob to get lower level mobsters.
It looks like a big fish, like a shark, coming in and going after little guppies. That's exactly what that looks like. And that's what the government bought into.
You know, the way that the government prosecuted the case, I think, you know, really bothered everybody.
We could not get a single person who was involved in prosecuting this case to talk to us about it, not one. They would have to explain their tactics. And even decades later, I'm not sure they want to. In the end, was justice done? Were the right people punished?
The right people were held accountable, sure, but there are a lot bigger fish that got away.
I don't think it was a win for anyone. It certainly was not a win for the people of the city of West New York.
A form of justice was done. Justice is never 100% in my opinion. Justice was done because it removed this huge, festering infection from Hudson County.
Rich Rivera paid a tremendous price for the integrity that he showed. He sues to get his job back. It's a 7-year battle. Ultimately, he reaches a settlement with West New York, and he then cannot get a police job anywhere in the country.
I got a reputation of being a dirty cop who got caught.
We both know how the world works, right? Usually when a cop's wearing a wire, it means they were caught and flipped.
Absolutely. That's not the case here.
And one of the things that comes from his 7-year lawsuit to try to get his job back is a letter from the U.S. Attorney, Robert Cleary. The letter vindicates Rivera. It says he was the one who contacted the FBI, that he was never a target of investigators, and that his information was the catalyst to bring down a corrupt department and the Cuban mob.
That's all I have, Walt. That's all I have. For 30 years, a 2-page letter that's not even addressed to me, not even a thank you.
You would think the letter might have made a difference. Ultimately, it doesn't. He still can't get a job.
And so he was going against the establishment. You know, who wants a rabble-rouser in your ranks, you know?
You spent a long time out of law enforcement.
Yeah, I'm out now, over 28 years. But I never left. I've been in law enforcement the entire time. I would advise chiefs, executives, county prosecutors, even the Attorney General, several of them over the past 2 decades on policing issues.
I would imagine that this was very satisfying for him, but at the same time, it's not the thing that he wanted most, which was to be back in uniform working as an officer. If you had it to do all over again, would you do the same thing?
No, why would I? There's too much to lose, too much at stake. So I could keep my dignity in place and have my character and my integrity, yeah, that's all great, well and good. But when you're in the arena and you're fighting this fight, is it worth it? No.
In a way, maybe it was an unfair question to ask somebody who's paid such a terrible price, would he do it again? At the same time, I don't believe him. I've known Rich Rivera for 30 years. The thought that he would be able to look the other way and not report it, it's not who he is.
This isn't where I ever imagined I'd end up, but it's a fantastic place, and it's a great ending to an incredible path.
When I first met Rich, he shared his story with me, and I remember thinking, wow, what a brave guy. When we shared with him the position was open, he just happened to be available, and he just turned out to be, you know, the best fit for it.
How have you enjoyed being police director?
Every day, I love it. I love going to work every day, working in the community. The officers that work under me, it's a stress-free environment. It's open door. They know they can come and share whatever the issues are that they're having.
For a man who once fought organized crime, you might think running a small-town police department would be a different experience. Rivera doesn't see it that way.
I grew up in a square mile that's just like this. It just happens to be 100 miles north and on a different river.
This was a guy whose only goal in life was to be a good cop.
He was a good cop, and I think that's the testament that will always be with him.
This has gone full circle. It's taken a little while, but here I am.